thank you for joining us to kick off the Clarion West Write-a-thon. I truly appreciate you all for joining us today. My name is Rashida Smith. I'm the program director at Clarion West. Don't let the Zoom tag fool you. Summer is my favorite time of year with Clarion West. We have opportunities to meet so many incredible authors and writers in our community with the Write-a-thon, and I'm excited to get started with all of you today. Because this is a special event kickoff, I'm going to keep things as informal as possible. Let's just imagine we're all in a room together. We're sharing an opportunity to be in community, which is something I think most of us really need right now. We have some of the team dropping information in the chat, and I hope that you are all getting your questions ready for the Q&A. I see 9 a.m. in Pakistan, enjoying noodles and listening to us. Awesome. Enjoy your noodles. If you're here and you're in the write-a-thon, would you please drop a link to your page in the chat? Tell us what your writing goals are for the next 2 weeks. I am in the write-a-thon. I am working on logging some words on a novella that's been chasing me for a year or two, so excited to get some things down for that. We're up to 115 participants for the summer. My hope is that folks will meet their writing goals, find community, and some support as well. And we've raised just over $7,000 in support for Clarion West for scholarships, year-round access seats, and our sliding scale tuitions. Unlocking our first Write-a-thon reward Q&A with our special guest instructor, Stephen Graham Jones. So thank you for joining us. So
Thrilled
Stephen
to be
has
here.
taught. I'm going to turn it over to you in just a second. I promise I will not talk the entire time. So Stephen's taught for the 6-week workshop 3 times, right?
I think
2012,
so. Yeah.
16, and 19. I was excited to meet you when you taught in 2019. There's a
Mm,
story that you read us that is still living rent-free in my
mm,
head. It's the one with the Achilles tendon thing.
yeah.
And I've been,
Yeah.
yes, terrifying. So thank you for that. If you're here, you're probably already familiar with his work. And I thought that the best introduction I can do at this moment is to share the weekly update that we sent our alumni after Stephen taught week 2 in 2019. A mysterious wind blew into town this week, bringing with it the scent of pages hot off the printer, a whiff of cups and cups of coffee, and Stephen Graham Jones. The prolific West Texan author wrangled students through the critiquing process with the ease of a seasoned ranch hand. In the process of speaking on each of their stories, Stephen shared details of his own road to publishing. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to talk to all y'all.
Yeah. So while folks are working on their questions for you, I'm going to get started with a few questions.
Hmm.
Mostly, we're just curious to know what your experience was with Clarion West and teaching the Clarion West 6-week 3 times.
It was intense. I guess the most pungent memory is I want to say the second time I taught. It was in that one the sorority house. I'm not sure if it's the same one that you used since then, but I got led up to my instructor's room in the corner on the second floor. And we opened the door, and it was all like shuttered, like with chairs on the desks, and like because nobody had been there. And all through the air was I thought it was initially like motes of dust that we had like jostled when we opened the door, but immediately we realized it wasn't motes of dust; it was baby spiders. And the person who was walking me up there said, "Oh, a kiting, like the spiders that just hatched, so they were floating all through the room." And I was like, well, this is something I don't see every day. And he said, oh, they won't hurt you. And so they just went ahead and helped me get set up. And so for that whole 5 days of class, like everything in that room was crawling with spiders. Like my brush, I'd pick my brush up and the bristles would just be like coated with spiders. And it was really kind of neat. And I'd come to class and I'd see spiders crawling off of me. It was pretty wild.
It's like, I feel like spider season started early just for you.
Yeah, yeah,
That is an official Seattle season. Anybody who's
yeah,
lived here long enough knows is about the time that's when we're all
yeah,
crawling with spiders. So it's
yeah, yeah.
fitting. You're the best instructor for that. All right. So tell us, what have you learned from teaching that 6-week experience? Is really intense, and you've
Hmm.
probably been at different weeks of that process. So
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about what you've learned about teaching that in that time.
Yeah, what I learned about teaching, which I still use in my workshops here at CU Boulder, is um, the first time I taught in 2012, the heads up I got was everyone will submit in Courier, and I said, well, I don't think so, and the people said yes, that's the way it's going to be, and so we went back and forth, and I finally said, all right, let's do it in Courier, and Courier was the best thing ever. I had never done workshops in Courier font, and And then I liked it so much that I now make my undergrad courses here submit everything in Courier because Courier is so much easier to edit. I love doing line edits on Courier because it's so spacey. And it makes and also I think it makes you be more thrifty with words because it takes up more space, you know. So if you have a page cap or something, you've gotta really be intentional about what you're doing. And so Courier font is the big thing I learned about teaching workshops from Clarion.
Really, I guess anything we can do to help, big or small. Do you have any memorable stories or experiences from any of those that teaching?
Oh, I remember workshopping a lot of the stories on a recumbent bike down at the YMCA, which I somehow had a membership to. And I remember feeling bad because, you know, it's when you're doing a machine, it's hard to be steady. So I felt like my marks were not as like legible as they should have been. That's probably the most memorable for me.
Okay. So, and you're super active as a writer. So how do you, is that right? Does the activity help you with your writing and your editing, or are you?
Yeah, not I mean not maybe the editing, but yeah, like I found I used to do you're doing a write-a-thon now. I used to probably 22 years ago. I would participate in the 3-day novel contest every year that used to be thrown, and where you start on a Friday and you start on a Friday at midnight, and by Monday at midnight you've written a novel, and that was really fun, you know. But what I learned from that was I only have about 90 or 96 minutes of actual good work in me at a time. And between those hour and a half sessions, I have to go do something with my hands, with my body, shoot free throws, work on my truck, go to Walmart and walk the aisles. I have to do something that is not writing. And so, yeah, I am very active. And I think I do that as a way to reset between writing sessions.
Okay, so for folks who don't know, during the 6-week workshop, the students write one short story a week in addition to
Mhm.
critiquing and reading the others. So what you're saying to us is that you are doing an entire novel of what length, perhaps, in that 3 days of
What
4 days?
was I don't what was the basement? It was probably 40 or 50,000 words. I think the novels I wrote were right around 40, 50,000 words. One of them, I only actually competed twice. The first time, the novel, I didn't think it held together. It had a really good ending, but the novel didn't hold together. But the second no time I did it, the novel worked and got published. So then I quit doing the 3-day novel contest.
Oh, so talk a little bit about, if you will,
Hmm.
your writing or novel attempts and what an attempt gets you. Because it sounds like maybe your first novel wasn't the one that was published in this particular run of experiences. So talk a little about what that teaches you
Oh
iterating
no,
like.
yeah, well, as far as a 3-day, I mean, I guess my first novel I ever wrote did get published back in 2000. I wrote it in 98, 99. But these 3-day novel contest novels, the first one I wrote did not get published, and it was because I didn't understand. I only had an hour and a half of good words in me, like I was saying. So I thought that how to write a novel in 72 hours was to stay awake as long as I could. And so I had all these like boxes of honeycombs ready and all these cans of spaghetti, like things to keep me awake, you know, and caffeine. And but I'd stay awake as long as I can, and then I would wake with like 14 pages of the letter J on, you know. And it wasn't, and it was like incoherent and jumbled, and there wasn't a through line, and I was more just hammering down words than I was telling a story. And um, so yeah, some things like, you know, my favorite way to revise is when I write a novella, a novel, a story, and it doesn't work, then the way I revise is I just write a better novel or novella or story. I don't actually try to fix the one that's broken. Um, I've seen too many writers spin out, spin their tires in a single story or novella or novel for months and years and just waste all the other stories and novellas and novels they could have been telling. Um, I think it's important to keep moving ahead all the time. I fully subscribe to Ray Bradbury's like dictum, write 52 stories a year, one story every week. It's impossible to write 52. It's possible to write 52 bad stories. You know, one or two of them is going to be good. And maybe another way to say that is I like to throw a lot of darts. I'm not like good enough to hit the bullseye, but if I throw 48 darts, one of them's going to accidentally hit the bullseye.
So what is it about those two or three? I'm sorry, the math just unmathed me.
Yeah.
But those out of that 52, if you've got two stories, what is it
Yeah.
about those two stories that sing to you that say, oh, we're the ones?
Oh, They unlock an emotion at the end, and they are surprising in the way they get to the end, generally. That's how that's kind of how I identify their work. However, I've found through, I mean, I've probably published 400 stories or something. I don't know. I've found that the stories that I believe in, that I think are timeless and perfect and are going to last forever, are never the ones that the audience likes. The ones that the audience likes are the ones that I'm like, well, this story sucks, but maybe somebody will want to do something with it. So I send it out, and then it gets anthologized everywhere and wins awards, and I don't understand what's going on, you know?
Well, what's the most surprising one of those stories that you feel like just really took legs as farther than you ever thought it would?
Probably Father, Son, Holy Rabbit. It's probably my most well-known story. It's a story people tend to know me for. I never felt like I really nailed the end of that story. Uh,
Mm.
but people connect with it, and I'm thrilled that they do, and I'm honored that they do. And it maybe makes me realize that I'm not the boss of my stories, you know? Like what I think holds together well and what the audience recognizes as having some sort of resonance are not the same thing. And the audience is right. I'm not the one that's right. Um,
So what advice then would you give to a writer kind of with that in mind that we may not always being so close to the work, we may not always see
mhm.
what is the thing? Like how would you advise someone who's looking at their story like, I don't know about this?
Mail it out. That's the way. That's the only real way you can test. Mail it out and see if people connect with it. I mean, editors have to connect with it first for people to connect with it, but it happens, you know. So I've had so many of my stories that I think are broken. I mail them out anyways, and they get picked up and catch on fire.
So you are quite, I think, well known for your horror writing, shall we
Hmm.
say? What lives at the heart of horror for you?
Probably. I mean, disturbance, I guess, and like that to me, that's horror's prime reason or dynamic. It intends to disturb. Um, Maybe reality, maybe somebody's sense of self, maybe somebody's feeling of safety or something. Which I think is good. It's good to poke and prod out those things. I think horror is doing actually responsible work, which for as transgressive as it can be, seems like a weird thing to say, but I'm not saying horror fixes the world, but horror is really good at identifying the problems of the world and dramatizing them and working like a funhouse mirror to reflect those things back to the world, to the audience, to the reader. For me, I think I just can't write anything but horror. I mean, I can write science fiction, I can write fantasy, I can write literary, but it all is always tending towards horror. Like I'll go 3 or 4 pages and I'll think, oh, it's another. I'm gonna do a Chekhov story here about a dude watching somebody walk their dog along a beach or something. But then on page 5, here comes a radioactive tentacle monster up on the in the surf, you know, and things get interesting. I guess maybe what I'm saying is I get bored, and I think that's why horror comes out all the time, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, and you talk there's a lot of surprise in horror and changing expectations and
Hmm.
creating roads that you're going to lead a reader down and then diverting. So, can you talk a little bit about how do you consciously put those things in? Are those things that come in revision? Is that where part of your process did the surprises come in?
You know, the surprises, I don't, they're not strategic. I'm not that kind of writer who can plan things out. I never work from an outline. I just stumble through and figure it out as I go, and then try to clean it up in revision and identify the through lines and how to maximize this or emphasize that or hide this better, that kind of stuff. But maybe a good example is I have a novella Mapping the Interior from 2017. It was just re-released this year, and there's a point in that, I'm not sure the page number, but where there's been a little action figure that's been a little bit important in the story between these two young brothers living in this isolated house. And there's a point at which one of the brothers comes home, I believe, from school, and the action figure is supposed to be gone, and he finds a leg of it on the porch when he gets home. And I wrote that because I was jamming along in my little hour and a half session, and I had to be somewhere in 5 minutes. And I thought, oh no, let's have something weird and big happen just as a placeholder. And so I dropped that leg in there with no idea in the world what it meant, how it impacted things or anything. And then when I got back, I didn't know where to go from that leg. But I don't, when I do things like that, I don't let myself delete them either because I think I have to become a better writer to figure out what the next thing is. I love to drop bombs in the story, which blow everything up, and then I have to figure out how, with a pen, I can stitch them all back together and keep moving forward. And I think if I have any kind of theory of how to build surprise into a story, that's it. Just drop random things in which totally break everything, and things you can't recover from. But you become a better writer when you figure out a way to get through it.
Uh, Amazing. I'm going to backtrack just a little. We have a
Mm,
question from the member of the audience, which I think
mm,
ties into the previous question about your stories, broken and working stories. And I
mm.
love this because I wish I had thought of this question. So Stuart asked, do you find you still write more stories you consider broken than ones that you think are successful? Or have you noticed that you're more able to write things that satisfy you now that you've been doing it for a while?
That's a really good question. Yes. I don't write more of ones that satisfy me now than I ever did. I think I used to write ones that satisfied me more, actually. Like 25 years ago. It's not that I had a lower threshold for quality, I don't think, or anything like that. I just think I think I took more formal chances 25 years ago writing stories. I would tell I like I would tell a story like a Sestina or a Villanelle, like that. I would do weird, wild swings that are built to fail, you know. And I think these days I do less built to fail stuff, and um, I think I can see my way through to the end of a story and figure out how it all goes together and wraps up and finishes better than I used to be able to. But and it's not because I'm taking less big swings. I think it's just because I've told the story so many times. But I take less formal chances with stories. With novels, I still take big formal swings. The novel I'm writing right now, I cannot understand how it's going to finish itself because I've done such a stupid thing with it. But maybe I'll figure it out. I don't know.
Oh, that's such a tantalizing detail to drop in that you've done a stupid thing, and now we all want to know what it is. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to even articulate what it is. It's just stupid.
So why do you think that is? Is that external expectation? Is that having a course that you sort of know where you're going with stories that has removed some of that? A friend of mine calls it table flipping, where you just oh see what
Mm.
happens.
Well, yeah. I think it's that 25 years ago, every story I wrote was not solicited. You know, I
Mhm.
didn't have an editor calling me and saying, "We need this story, we need that story, we need it by then." I was writing stories completely out in the wild with nobody watching. And with nobody watching, it was like I was a scientist in a lab with random things in test tubes and I was pouring them together to see what would happen, you know? Nowadays, nearly every single story I write is due to a solicitation. And
Mhm.
except for flash fiction, I still write flash fiction on my own. And my flash fiction still adopts weird forms, I think. But because these stories are both like thematically constrained and on a deadline, that always tells me that I can take a less big swing because I know I'm not going to do the story until one day before the deadline, and the editor's not going to read it until the day of the deadline, or maybe even after that, and I'm not going to have time or the time in in my writing schedule with all the other deadlines I have to whip up a new story. And so maybe I do play it a little bit safe and tell a story more conventionally, you know? But I don't know if that's necessarily bad either because um I feel like in my, I don't know, writerly evolution or whatever you want to call it, um, I think I skipped the normal story step of it, you know, like the conventional story. Like from the time I was young 20s, I was telling stories in weird ways. And I always wanted to learn how to tell a Raymond Carver story, how to tell how to tell a Chekhov story. You know, I didn't want to. I didn't never want to tell an Alice Munro story. She always bugged me. But there's like normal ways to tell stories where the flash is in the characters and the development instead of the delivery method. You know, and I feel like I skipped that, and so I feel like I'm kind of learning that now, or being forced to learn that.
Well, I think we are grateful for the way the stories you're telling and that only you could tell. It's
Oh,
funny,
thank
the
you.
grass is always greener from the other side of how somebody else does something. Writers, if you're watching, this is proof that you are always sort of looking at what the other person, thing other people can be doing. But please remember that your own voices and your own stories are the things that bring you to, I think, success,
Mhm,
and internal satisfaction, maybe some. And we are very glad that you're still writing your novels and taking big swings in novel
mhm,
length, because I think we can
mhm.
all agree that novel length is gives us way more time to be scared and surprised and thrilled by your big swings.
Thank you.
Vicky in the audience has a question about organizing a complex novel like Buffalo Hunter. How do you approach that?
There was no organization for Buffalo Hunter Hunter. I didn't like I started out Buffalo Hunter Hunter. I thought it was just gonna be a Lutheran pastor relaying the story of well, I didn't know I tell you the truth, I didn't know he was gonna be relaying the story. I thought it was gonna be kind of like a dramatic situation. We're gonna be a removed camera watching these two people talk in the back of a church after service is over. But then suddenly it became epistolary, and suddenly it had a wrapper around it of 2012 of a great 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 granddaughter relaying this or transcribing this found journal. And no, I had no idea where this book was going. The big surprises to me were the cats, because I've never been a cat person. I don't have cats, and so when these cats showed up, I was like, "This is wild and weird. I do not know what to do with these cats," you know. And so that was really fun for me. It's like when my characters drink coffee, because I can't even tolerate the smell of coffee. So when my characters drink coffee, I'm always like, "These are some weird people, man. I don't know what's going on."
Wait a minute. So what is your caffeine delivery system then if you're not a coffee nose?
Well, I mean, lots of iced tea, lots of energy drinks, caffeine tablets. I am completely addicted to caffeine. You know, you're asking for my like what's my most clear memory of a Clarion story. And actually, I almost told the story of I think it was my first time there in 2012. Um, this involves caffeine. That's why I'm telling it. I got there and I think I got there on Saturday or Sunday before, class starts on Monday, and they took me to Whole Foods, which I don't love Whole Foods. I like Walmart a lot better. And so we went to Whole Foods and had to get stuff for me to eat and drink for the week. And I got a couple of jugs of tea, and I thought I can survive if I got tea. And so I was just chugging that tea for the first I think 3 days. And by the third day, I thought I had strep throat and flu and everything. I was up in my room with a fever, just fetal position on my bed, shaking and sweating. And I thought, this is it, I'm gonna die. And then I somehow made it down to Jack in the Box or somewhere and got an iced tea with a burger. And I started feeling better. And I realized that those jugs of tea I got didn't have enough caffeine for me. You know, I was in bad shape from no caffeine. And so I got some different tea and I was good to go, you know?
So whenever, send caffeine.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Questions from the chat are coming in, so I'm gonna just switch over
Hmm.
to those a little bit.
Hmm.
Uh, One is from Mahalia. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. And the question is, as a Pakistani, I want to know how hard it is for a BIPOC science fiction fantasy writer to break into the industry. Do we need to work extra hard to be noticed by trad pubs or agents?
Um, that's a good question. Um, I mean, I know it from the horror angle, but that's not that different from science fiction fantasy as far as traditional publishing goes. Did I have to work harder? I think what I had to work harder to do, and this was probably just a me thing, not an industry thing, was I never wanted to be published because I was Blackfeet, because I was indigenous. I always wanted to be published on the quality of my writing. And so early in my career, my first like 2 books, maybe 3 books, I would go do book events for them. And the questions I would get were always indicative that the text was being used as a lens
Mhm.
to focus on a culture instead of the people being interested in the story itself. And that to me is just hugely insulting. And so I said, screw y'all. And then I went directly the other way, as much the other way as I could. And I just wrote about the schlockiest zombies and everything I could for a lot of years, daring those people to find the indigenous aspects of that because I never wanted to be I never want to be what people like people always want to put an adjective in front of your name and say you're a Native American writer, but that adjective they put in front of your name is a handle they can use to put you on a shelf and forget about you. I just want to be a writer, you know. I'm the only adjective I really like that persists is New York Times best-selling. I can live with that one, you know, but I'm not thrilled with all the other ones. I mean, I am a horror writer. I consider myself a horror writer, but still I just want to be a writer. But that doesn't really answer your question about breaking in. Um, when I started publishing short stories in 1995, um, I guess I never said in my bio or my cover letter or anything that I was Blackfeet, because I already knew I didn't want to be known as a Native American writer. And um, also, I very intentionally didn't write about Blackfeet stuff because I thought that would give away that I was Blackfeet. And so I feel like I spent a few years hiding that I was Blackfeet because I was afraid of getting that handle on in front of me. But then it happened anyway, so I had to, do a lot of things to run away from that. Maybe I'm still running away from it. I don't know. Or maybe I think what really happened, the reason now I can do stuff like Buffalo Hunter or The Only Good Indians is I've spent so many years at a mic in front of groups of people dealing with those questions that I've finally figured out how to navigate them a lot better and come back at those people and shut them down. You know, early in my career, I didn't know how to shut them down. Now I'm a lot better at shutting them down. Oh, the people I shut down don't make it through the signing line, but oh well.
It does, yeah, it seems like a kind of an interesting boundary to have to draw,
hmm
um, as a person of color and in a genre or in publishing sphere that wants to put a handle on you. It's like where
hmm
you get to set the conversation about what part, if any, your background plays in your writing or any particular work. So
Yeah.
it sounds like figuring out how to draw that boundary and how to keep the conversation on the level that you're wanting to get into
Yeah.
at any given moment is key to that. Do you have any
Yeah.
advice for folks on how to do that?
Oh, don't worry about hurting people's feelings. That's finally what I had to finally
Yeah,
arrive at, you know. I mean, you can't always play nice, you know.
yeah.
hmm
Yeah, there's this kind of expectation that folks of color are gonna always, like, take the highest road and be the
hmm
nicest and, like,
hmm
put up with the question and, "Okay, I will answer because you asked, and I should just be grateful for the attention."
Yeah.
It's kind of a bogus thing, so,
Yeah, it is.
you
Yeah.
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 So back to some of the start of your career stuff, because I think this takes us back a
Yeah.
little bit. I have another great question about dealing with rejection and self-doubt. And how did you get over those moments when if you ever decided you wanted to stop writing because of all of that noise or any of that
Um,
noise?
yeah, no, I still get rejected. Like I remember a few years ago, I got invited to be part of the debut issue of a new and hot magazine. They said, "We want your name in the table of contents." And I said, "All right." So I sent them a story and they said, "Nah, not this story," you know? And I mean, I still get rejected. Um, even my agent, I've written novels for her. I've written novels and given them to her to sell, and she'll say, "This novel is not worth anything," you know? And and sometimes you publish a novel and you get rejected at that level. People say this is not the novel we wanted or expected or tolerate, you know. And I keep all my rejections. I've got them in a big 3-ring binder up here. It's like this big. It's like the biggest one you can get, the biggest 3-ring binder you can get. And the reason it's in a binder is because I used to carry all my rejections in a box, but we moved so much. My wife said we are not moving this stupid box anymore, and so she took an afternoon and got laminate paper or whatever, like scrapbooking stuff, and she organized all my rejection letters for me. And so anytime I want to see if like Quarterly West hates me, I can just go to the cues, and know that they hate me. Or especially fantasy and science fiction. But this is mostly back when Gordon Van Gelder was running it, which isn't anything about him. It just happened to be during his era. I think I got 37 rejections in a row from them. That still I've never gotten. I haven't submitted there for years and years, but that's probably my longest run of rejections is 37. Um, and how to deal with it, I never let it hurt me. I always just put that person, that editor, that magazine, that publisher on my hate list. You know, it's always fuel. I use the rejections as fuel. I'm like, you're going to regret rejecting me. I'm going to be someone you're going to wish was in your like stable of writers, you know? So, yeah, I never have let rejection touch me. I just use it as fuel.
Yeah, like that. I've definitely started stories out of spite, kind of
Hmm.
falling in love with them later, but just like use that mode to motivate you to get on to the next thing. You know, the
For sure.
rejection is a rejection of the story also, I think not you, the writer. It should be,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I've gotten some really personal rejections that say you should quit writing. This is the worst story I've ever read. All that kind of stuff, you know. Yeah,
that's just unprofessional. I
yeah. Well,
mean,
I had one publisher like reject a book I'd done, and when publishers reject a novel, it's usually like they have a checklist, like this doesn't fit our catalog, or we're already doing a novel of this type, or we don't know how to market this. They have all these like standard rejections, ways they reject a novel. This editor at this publisher, which was a New York house, took the time to write a 3-page detailed letter about why this was the worst novel ever and how much I sucked as a writer and everything. And it was really fun. I wish I still had that rejection, but in that folder that I have, I put it in there and I pass that around to my students a lot. I've been doing that for years and years, and one of those times, one of those students snagged it, so that student has it now. I don't have it. I wish I did.
and well, and kudos, to your wife and your like that's such a great partner who's willing to go through all of those and organize them for you and maybe
Yeah.
spare you the mental load of having to sort them. So yeah. So I want to ask a question from Aisha too in the chat about your technique, the slasher cam technique. You've
Hmm.
described in a past interview using that slasher cam technique, slipping into the killer's POV mid-paragraph by dropping into
Hmm.
second person or shifting
Hmm.
perspective without section break. What verbs, narrative signals, or pacing choices do you rely on so the POV switch feels seamless and keeps the tension tight?
Yeah, the only time I've done that trick, particularly in that way, is in No Good Indians. When, Only Good Indians is a slasher. To me, it's a slasher. It's built on a slasher scaffolding. And I realized in writing it that the slasher was like baked in the cinema. So it has in the box office. So it has cinematic techniques baked in. And one of those techniques is a slasher cam. Like you're looking through the slasher has their mask on. You're looking through their eye holes at the house, the camp, the tent, whatever, and you can hear their breathing, and it's all very present tense. And and so when I was writing the Only Good Indians, I realized, all right, time to jump into the killer's head, the killer's angle, and so I dropped a section break and went over, and it was so fake because that section break telegraphed what was happening, and the result of that was there was no surprise. That didn't leave the reader off balance, and so I thought, well, I'm going to do it like James Joyce might have done it, and just do it mid-sentence, like at a clause. And I tried that, and that didn't work either because it felt like a typo. And so I finally settled on doing it at a break in the line or a break or maybe just a paragraph break, but dropping into from present tense third person to present tense what we think is second person. You realize at the end it's actually dramatic monologue, which was really a fun shift to do, but it feels like second person while you're reading it because you don't know what's coming. Um, and as for like technique, word choice, all that, verb choice, the tense was the same, and it was really just about the difference in third person and second person. But the second person was kind of limited by like mask holes or eye holes or something. They didn't necessarily have access. They weren't objective. They weren't above everything necessarily. They were locked into their own head very tightly, which locks the reader in very tightly as well. So it was really fun, but it was a trick I could only do once. I can't ever do that trick again because I can't be a one-trick pony. I've got to keep finding new things.
Mhm. Well, that's exciting. Well, it's kind of sad to hear because that's such a good trick. I mean, I would love to read half a dozen novels with that but I can see what you mean. You got to find something new.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just gonna again go back through our chat. We have a question from someone about switching between story length and deciding what's going to be a flash, a short story, a
Hmm.
novella, or a novel. How do you do that?
Um, I
And
used
some
to write a
a lot of
whole.
short stories are asked for. So maybe
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're like you have like a lot of short stories that I get solicited for are will pay 10 cents a word up to 6,000 words. After that, you don't get anything extra. And so I realize, oh, it's a 6,000 word story, you know. Um,
what can I do in
but
6,000 words?
yeah, but I used to write a whole lot more flash fiction than I do these days. And what I realized was, and what I kind of went back and looked at my period of most productivity concerning flash fiction, and it coincided with when my kids were young. And what that meant to me was that when my kids were young, I always had Bounty selector size paper towels around, and because I always had Bounty selector size paper towels around, they became what I wrote stories on while I was playing with my kids. And so I'd get my pen and start at the top left corner and write a story. And when I got to the bottom right corner, I was done, and that's about 600 words. And so, because my kids were young and I had those paper towels all the time, I wrote a lot of flash fiction. Once my kids didn't need me to be wiping, Jello off their forehead, I didn't have as many paper towels around, and so I didn't write as much flash fiction, which is terrible. I should, I don't know, go borrow a niece or something so I can have more paper towels around, you know.
Somebody send Steven some paper towels, please.
But as for novel versus story or versus novella, um, it usually is just what's requested, And somebody needs a story, somebody needs a novella, I have a novel due. That's kind of what dictates what it's going to be. I've never had a story turn into a novella or novel. I have twice had novellas turn into novels because they got carried away. That's The Babysitter Lives in the Killer Road, which are out on Tuesday, I guess. Um, Let me think. I guess Good Indians kind of did. It was kind of a novella that turned into a novel. Um, but no, I've never had a story get away from me and become anything bigger. It always like it's like from that first paragraph, from the tone, I can always tell, oh, this is gonna wrap up at 4,500 words and everybody's gonna be dead. So it can't go any further than that.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say then like creating some boundaries or some kind of boxing around the format or the time you give yourself to write it, the paper
hmm
towel size you have access to help
hmm
you to kind of do that switch? Or is it just the idea that's whatever idea that you're working with at that moment is the length that it is?
I think it's the idea, and the big difference for me is that novels tend to end with hope, redemption, with with a ramp that goes up, whereas stories can end any old way, and they tend to end down. Most stories, I think, tend to end kind of on a down note, and um, that they're a lot easier to tell because it's really hard to rig an ending that tends upward. It's really a lot easier to kill everybody, you know?
All right. Heard it from the source. When you need to just everybody.
Mhm.
Some good laugh emojis happening in the chat right now. That one hit a good note with folks. So how do you know which idea will be, I'm going to put good in quotes, good enough to become a novel? Are you starting with a
Mhm.
voice, place, theme? What is the inciting or what have been inciting entry points?
I used to, and I guess I still do to some degree on my phone, but used to I would carry around those like notebooks that are like that big, that spiral bound, like I don't know, 120 pages, maybe 200 pages, and I would always write novel premises down. And this can be a great one. This can be a great one. And over the years, I collected probably 120, 150 of those notebooks, and I had them lined up on a shelf, all neat. And I realized I've never gone back to one of those a single time because I think ideas are completely useless. Story premises are just like you can make one up in 10 seconds. It doesn't matter what the story is. What matters to me is I call it voice, but that's just because I don't have a better word. I know other people mean different things by voice. What I mean by voice is the angle at which exposition flows into a story. And probably the best example I can give of that is my novel, The Long Trial of Nolan Gotti. The first line is something like, what I remember best about my father are the suicide notes. And um, the fact that the note is plural means he has multiple suicide notes, which means he made multiple suicide attempts. And that already gives me the scaffolding of the story. This story is going to be 6 or 8 or 10 of his suicide attempts. And also, I have his notes that are left behind, and I realized that and that what that first line tells me is we're going to see those notes. We're going to have the story is going to be staggered around those notes. And that to me is the angle at which exposition flows into the story. And also, that first line also tells me it's going to be first person narrated by the child of this father, you know? So that to me opens up the whole novel, and I can tell a whole novel like that so easily if I have that first line to just make things work, I guess. And um it's like it how to explain it? It's like, you know, when you watch a dirt bike race. You have all those dirt bike racers on their motorcycles, and they have that ramp in front of their tires. You know, what I'm always waiting is for that ramp to fall away in a way that I can blast through the whole track, and that track is the novel. And that ramp, that little thing that falls away, is never an idea. It's always a voice saying a line that tells me how the novel's going to be, and that's what's worth something. That those are really rare, but ideas are completely useless to me.
That's an amazing analogy. It's so easy to picture that snap of moment. Goes. So Izzy wants to know if your approach changes when you know you want to write sequels.
Mhm,
This is specifically thinking of the Indian Lake trilogy here, but not
mhm,
limited to that.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, Don't Fear the Reaper, the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw. My Heart is a Chainsaw was published and intended to be a standalone. I never planned on it being a sequel. It didn't become a sequel until it was already in print, actually. And I thought, you know, maybe I'll just do another one. And so I think the best place to start a sequel from is a place where you have nothing whatsoever, where you have not set anything up even a little bit. Those are my favorite kind of sequels, the ones that I think there can't be another part. Like I guess the best example I can think of, well, the two best examples I can think of, the first is Streets of Laredo coming after Lonesome Dove, Larry McMurtry's Lonesome Dove. I don't see how Streets of Laredo came out of that, but it does because we don't have Gus anymore. Gus was the heart and soul of Lonesome Dove, you know? How can there be a whole huge novel without Gus? But there is, and it's amazing, and it should not be as good as it is. And also, like Friday the 13th, it was meant to be a standalone, but it was so popular that the studio insisted there be a sequel. And so all the prime creators dove off. They said there can't be a sequel. And they brought in a different set of creators who sifted through the ashes, just trying to get the most gossamer thread of story they could pull to string a sequel out. And they did it. A lot of people say two is the best installment. Some people say six is, but two is pretty good for sure of that franchise. I love that's the kind of sequel I love is when there's nothing there but you find it anyways. You know, the sequels that I feel like are staged, that are built in, those are never as interesting to me.
That sounds absolutely terrifying, which then fits
mm
basically
mm
to start
mm.
with nothing. So yes,
Yeah,
I could see how that works very well for you. You're good at the
yeah,
again mastering the terror.
yeah.
A great question here that someone has asked about. What's the one thing you would say that's made you a stronger writer? And take that however.
That I think it's that I choose writing over not disappointing people. Like I have all these responsibilities, all these like meetings and people I'm supposed to pick people up at the airport. There's all these things I'm supposed to do. And um, I choose writing over all those, and I just deal with people being disappointed with me. You know, um, I don't care if people are disappointed. If I get a story, then that's what matters to me.
All right, we've got another one in this vein of your inspiration
Mm.
and where you draw your inspiration from.
Um, I don't know if I ever felt inspired. I feel compelled. I feel like if I'm not sitting here at the keyboard tapping words onto the screen, then I'm not earning the air I breathe. I think that's the only reason I'm in the world is to tell stories. And um, if I stop telling stories, I think I just might smoke away and but you know not exist anymore. And so stories are what keep me anchored to the world, keep me alive. And so I'm never inspired, I'm just compelled. Yeah, I just have to write.
Oh, I can take a moment to think that, let that sink in. Um, we have another one that goes back to our earlier conversation about
Hmm.
volume stories and just producing a volume to get a few that
Hmm.
to get to the gems. Sanjar wants to know if you write a lot of stories, say 52 a year, how do you know when to abandon it or stop investing in it, stop working
Hmm.
on it, mailing it in, etc.? And what do you do with those abandoned stories?
Um, I rarely will abandon them, but that's usually because a story takes me generally a single afternoon to write, maybe 2 afternoons. If it takes longer than 2 afternoons, then I will throw it away because I think I'm just spinning my wheels. I'm pushing a boulder uphill, and what's the use of that? Nobody wants to watch that. I like to write stories that are like I'm in a bobsled track, just going out of control downhill. That's what I like, and so the ones that I abandon are the ones that take more than 2 afternoons generally. Um,
Hmm.
and usually, the ones that take 1 afternoon, maybe 2 afternoons, I luck into an ending that brings it all together because generally they're broken until I write that last paragraph, and that makes it work.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay, so follow-up question came in fast and furious. What's the length of a one afternoon story or a two afternoon story?
Oh, I've done 10,000 words in an afternoon. Generally, probably about 5,000, 6,000 words in an afternoon.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's prioritizing, right? And is that 90-minute session you're talking about, or are you
Probably a couple of 90-minute sessions. Yeah.
okay? And
Yeah.
then, so are you writing every day, Stephen Graham Jones?
No, I'm not. I'm always waiting to grow up and become a scheduled writer with a regiment, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. I'm 53 years old. It's kind of late to kind of hammer myself into that mold. I'm more of a binge writer. I'm a binge writer and a catch-up writer. What I mean by a catch-up writer is I'll tell an editor I'll write a story for them by October 15th, and they email me on October 14th, and they'll say, "Hey, everybody's got their stories in. Are you giving me yours tomorrow?" And I'll say, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm just polishing it up." And then I run to my keyboard and start that story because I forgot to write the story. I always forget to write the stories I'm supposed to write until the last possible minute, and then I just jam it out real fast. And I that's the way I like to work. I don't, if, give me a lot of time to do it and I'll overthink it. Give me 2.5 hours to kick out 8,000 words and I can do something decent.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, there's nothing like the power of a deadline. I see in the
Hmm.
chat. Yeah,
Hmm.
there's a little
Hmm.
external pressure to just get things done. So how do
Yeah.
you fill your well when you're not writing?
How do I what?
Fill your well, your creative well,
Oh,
inspiration.
I read constantly comic books, novels, stories, novellas. I try to read well outside my field. Like, I'm a horror writer, so I do keep my thumb on the pulse of horror, but I read a lot of science fiction, fantasy, literary fiction, magic realism, new fabulism, a lot of popular science too, a lot of paleoanthropology, and I'll read a book on botany, and I like to read stuff I completely that like doesn't plug into any of like my interests, and that I feel like that if anything fuels me or fills my well or then that's probably what it is.
Mm, it's amazing. Great questions, you all. We have just a few more minutes, so go ahead. If we have any
Yeah.
last questions, drop them in the chat now. If you
Yeah.
haven't had a chance to ask your burning question, it's now or never.
And also I
Uh,
was I was I was like 4 minutes late, so I'm happy to stay a little late. I'm sorry,
Oh yeah,
y'all.
we're gonna take us a little bit over the hour
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
want to go ahead and just give everybody on the chat a little bit of external pressure.
Yeah.
Here's your
Yeah.
deadline. You have a minute and a half. Come up with your questions, throw them in the Q&A. Not the chat. Use that Q&A feature. I heard that you taught a graduate level class about vampires.
Hmm.
Wow.
Hmm.
Was there anything about that surprised you, and why vampires?
Because I hadn't done it. This is the course is called Study 10 here at CU Boulder, and the instructor gets to choose what topic, and the topic is anything you're interested in. And I've done this course on possession narratives. I've done it on haunted houses. I've done it on young adult literature. I've done it on found footage fiction. I've done a lot of different topics, and I only ever do them once because maybe I'll do haunted house again eventually because I feel like I might need a reminder of how all that works. But but they're always for me research on how to write this kind of novel. Like I taught found footage fiction, and then I was a teenage slasher, which is found footage fiction. I taught the vampire class, and then I wrote Buffalo Hunter Hunter. I taught a possession course, and now I'm trying to write a possession novel. Who knows if it's going to work out? And yeah, I taught a young adult course, and then I co-wrote a young adult novel with a friend. So I just teach whatever. I teach whatever I don't know about because I think the instructor should always not be the expert in the room, just the person at the front of this expedition into a dark cave who's holding the torch, so we can shine light and figure out what's going on, how do the conventions work in this genre? What's the audience expecting? What are the little dynamics that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise? And that's kind of what I discovered in the vampire course was the little like characteristics of the vampire and how they plug together to make a believable creature. That was really helpful for me.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow, see, that external deadline does work. We've got a few extra questions in the
Hmm.
chat, so got definitely some deadline people in the chat. What's the weirdest story you remember reading that seemed like it shouldn't work, but it did? From Stuart.
Yeah, friend of mine has a story called Charlie, and oh, I'm spacing on his name, Dan. I can't remember his last name. I have so many friends named Dan that I always get them mixed up. Anyways, it's a story called Charlie, and this character wakes up. His name is Charlie, and he looks in the mirror, and um, then he Charlie's down to the toothbrush, and then as the story goes on, it's probably a 10-page story. Every word in the story starts to be replaced with Charlie. Charlie is a verb at first, and then Charlie is a verb and a noun and a name of the character. And as the story goes on, it's Charlie, Charlie, Charlie. It's like that scene in Being John Malkovich, where John Malkovich goes into his own head and he's in that room and he sees himself everywhere. It's that kind of story. And I would never think to write that story. And it's such a cool trick. Such a cool trick.
That sounds amazing.
Mhm.
What Paris wants to know what your advice is on applying feedback, especially when it varies between readers.
Oh man, yeah. I guess my big suggestion there or advice is yeah, you're in a workshop with 12, 15 people, and every one of them will have a different question. Why does this character do this? How does this work? What's that door lead to? Everything. And as the writer, what you've got to understand is these aren't necessarily questions you have to answer. They're signals that this reader is engaged with this world and is wondering this, that, or the other. And so just because they're asking what was this character doing at their 12th birthday party doesn't mean you have to put that in the story. And by the same token, if someone tells you, on page 8, I think that that person should be wearing corduroy pants, not plaid pants, um, they're wrong. Well, they might be right in telling you something's up with the pants, but people can't tell you how to fix a thing. They can tell you something's broken, you know?
Uh, we just want to know where your inspiration comes from. Lynette wants to know is there a who in your inspiration bucket that inspired you to write horror?
Yeah, that's a good question. Who it might be Ray Bradbury, his old story, The Velt from the Martian Chronicles, I think it is. Yeah, that story, when I read that, I was like in fourth grade and it just opened my mind and terrified me and fascinated me. And there's also a story I read at the same time called The Stone Boy, which I still think about and I think I'm still trying to write. And the Stone Boy is not as well known as the Bradbury, but the Stone Boy is these two brothers wake up before dawn. They're living out in the country and they're going out to pick grapes because if you can get to the grapevines, evidently I've never done this, but if you can get to the grapevines while it's still cool, then the little stalks that each individual grape is on are stiffer, and so the grape breaks off cleaner. And so they're trying to get there early enough for good grape picking. And they have a 22 with them so they can plunk a rabbit if they see a rabbit. And there's a fence they have to cross, a three-strand barbed wire fence they have to get across to get to the grape vineyard. That seems like a weird word. I guess it is. But anyways, the grape place. Yeah. And and
Feels
so yeah, and one of the brothers, they lean the 22 on the fence and they're crawling through. And while they're doing that, the rifle gets jostled and goes off and shoots the big brother in the base of the head and kills him. He falls over dead, and the little brother looks back and he goes on to pick grapes because it's a good time to pick grapes. And he gets the grapes and comes back to the house, and they say, "Where's the big brother?" And he says he died. He's back there by the fence, and the family is all freaking out. They're saying to the guy, that little brother, "Why didn't you freak out? He died." And he says it was a good time to pick grapes, you know?
Mhm.
And that story really has stuck with me through the years.
Yeah, I remember the first time I read The Belt for sure. I was, and I
Hmm.
just imagery was so vivid.
Hmm.
And the sound, I think it was the sound cues that he gives of the lions. Um,
Hmm.
okay, so we have one question going back to your story starts.
Hmm.
So I think, Sandra, we're talking about, so this would, I guess, be about a story that you don't have um, an anthology or a request to write, and you're just starting cold. And no, the question is no idea, concept, or planning ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't imagine having an idea or a concept or a plan for a story. That just, to me, is why would I tell the story if I knew how it's going to end? I tell stories to figure out how they're gonna
Mhm.
solve themselves, how they're gonna turn out. Um, let's see. How about I just wrote a story for Ellen Datlow, who's taught at Clarion a lot of times herself, and I had no idea what this story in the whole world was gonna be. It's coming out in the Halloween anthology. It's not published yet, and I knew I only had 2 hours to write this story because I had to get back to writing my novel. And so I thought, what's the most fun first line I can think of? And immediately, the line I landed on, I'm probably not going to get this exactly right, but it's something like, three of my foes are animals, or three of my main foes are animals, And that told me that I'm about to cycle through these three main foes that are animals and how we deal with each of those foes. And I knew it was going to somehow ramp through Halloween. I had no idea how that was going to happen. And so that's an example of a story that I had zero idea how it was going to happen, and but it totally worked out. It's the most fun story I've written in quite a long time, and Datlow accepted it right away, and she had no big notes, and it all worked. But um, so I think when I don't have even a shred of an idea, I try to come up with a fun hook line, and the hook line just opens the door for the story.
Do those hook lines always wind up being your first line, or do they come in
Yeah.
other places? Yeah.
No, I mean, probably like, I don't know, 10% of the time, maybe on page two, I'll stumble upon what turns out to be the hook line, and then I'll advance it and usually cut out that first page and a half or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the warm
Hmm.
up to get to whatever
Hmm.
that would
Hmm.
be. Yeah.
Hmm.
So you're right. I think both you and Evelyn have taught several times at Clarion West over the
Hmm.
year. We've got a couple of Clarion of the current year's crop of students in the chat, and possibly some folks from our novel writing workshop as well, which is going on right now.
Cool.
If you would give them any advice or anything you would tell them about their Clarion West experience, you
Hmm.
would want to share with them, what would it be?
Um, I guess what I've seen of the Clarion West experience is this cohort that you go through with are going to be your cohort for the rest of your career. You'll be bonded in a way that you probably are surprised by. And it's really pretty cool. And I like how Clarion provides like booster rockets for writers' careers. I see that over and over. Like one of my students I had, I think when I taught the first, or I don't know, maybe it's the second time, I think a year or two after she was in my Clarion workshop, we were both up for a Shirley Jackson Award, and she beat me, and I'm like, this is the dream, to be beaten by a student in an
Mhm.
award. That's what you want, and that's what Clarion does for students. So I've had some of my students from CU go through Clarion, and they're showing up everywhere in best of the year stuff and magazines. It's really pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah. Well, we are close getting to the hour. So I think we might let you go, maybe with one final question.
Hmm.
What the scariest monster?
What's the scariest monster to me?
Sure. Yes. For all of us. No, you
Um,
speak to all of our ids right now.
yeah,
It's gonna be
no,
very important.
I
At
know.
least just for you. We'll give it just for
Yeah,
you. Or the scariest one to write, do you think? Take that. Take
yeah. I think this. I mean, Yeah, all the creatures are scary. The ones with claws, teeth, the ones who have you know, means of predation that you can't really resist. Those are all scary. But to tell you the truth, the ones that are scariest to me are the ones that are arbitrary, which is to say that the two most arbitrary monsters are always either humans or demons. Um, and that might be the same thing in some cases, but the ones that you're just cooking up, you're going to the store to get a loaf of bread, and suddenly you're wrapped in a horror story. And it's not because you went to a house and rang a doorbell. It's not because you read an old book. It's not because you chanted a song you shouldn't have chanted, anything like that. You didn't invite this human, this Ted Bundy, or this Pazuzu or whatever into your life. They found you randomly, arbitrarily, and that to me is just stultifyingly terrible. Terrifying, I should say. Yeah.
Well, we could listen to you tell us about more
Hmm.
terrifying things all day, but we'll let you
Hmm.
get back to your story for today, whatever it is you're working on.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for being with us. You would come back and talk to us any old time you like. We would, I think, all agree that we'd be happy to spend another hour together. Lots of thanks coming in from folks in the chat, our folks here in the room. Everybody's, oh, wow, it's scared it's grown. So thank you so much for being with us. Everyone in the chat, thank you all for being here too. Appreciate your questions. Such good questions coming in this entire time. We've enjoyed having you here. Um, I hope you're off to a great start with your write-a-thon. So those of us who are here in the room are going to sit down and write for an hour. Thanks for the inspiration. And our team is dropping more links in the chat right now. So let us know if you have any more questions, or you can always join us in Discord, where we'll be hanging out this summer for the write-a-thon. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And thanks again for joining us, everyone.